Hello, I'm Esther Gitu-Ewart. Welcome to Africa 54. Here's what's coming up.
Rises following devastating landslides in southern Ethiopia. Search and rescue efforts continue. U.S. President Joe Biden addresses the nation Wednesday in his first speech since dropping out of the presidential race. Meanwhile, Vice President Kamala Harris hits the campaign trail. And in our technology report, a Kenyan national uses biofloc technology in fish farming. He speaks to our tech reporter, Paul Ndiho. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54.
The death toll from two landslides in southern Ethiopia has risen to 229 and may climb higher on Wednesday as the search for survivors and casualties continues, according to a government official. Heavy rain caused a landslide that buried people in the Gofa zone of southern Ethiopia on Sunday. Then a second landslide engulfed others who had gathered to help on Monday morning. Video shared by local administration showed people digging up bodies with shovels and bare hands.
The number of dead is increasing a lot. So far, we have identified 157 dead bodies. The number can go high, much more than this, as the number of people who rushed to the scene to help with the rescue led to the discovery of a massive second wave. We will keep updating the public with verified information. The devastation is huge and beyond our capacity. As a result, there are a lot of people who were uprooted from their livelihoods in the area. The area is now uninhabitable. We need to also work on relocating these people.
Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed says he is deeply saddened by the terrible loss of life. Now to Kenya, where survey findings by the nation's Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission revealed that the country's ministries are viewed as the most corrupt. VOA's Paul Ndiho interviewed Sombo Muzata, the director of the MPA program, an assistant professor in the Department of Political Science at James Madison University, on Kenya's corruption issues.
When you have a situation where the majority of people feel like they're not being governed properly, it is likely that you see what we have seen happen over the last few weeks in Kenya. Governance has changed, and most of our politicians haven't caught up with that reality. It's not a one-way relationship anymore, where for a long time, people would just get instructions from the leaders, okay? Public officials and politicians would call the shots, and it was okay, it was fine, okay? Because for the most part, it was believed that they're supposed to give the instructions and the orders, and this is how we're going to do things. And then the masses, the population, sort of didn't have the power, and they didn't have a way to express themselves. But we've seen, because of technology, because of social media, pretty much everyone, has a voice now, okay, and has a voice that can be heard. And I think everybody can clearly see that now in the example of other countries where social media has been used extensively to create change, or at least to start movements, to start social movements that have caused some sort of change in the way things are done. And we can see that happening in Kenya. And in this particular instance, I think there's going to be a little bit more thought about what accountability means and how leaders, politicians, and public officials can be accountable to the larger population.
How important is fighting corruption? We talk about corruption, but in most cases, we look at corruption as just stealing maybe public funds. But corruption is more than that. Would you agree? Yes, corruption is more than that. I think thinking through what the consequences are of corruption is probably what would get a number of people to stand on their feet and say, wait, okay? So they now have to think, how best can they engage with the young people? How can those demands be met? And of course, the bit of promising to fight corruption is one thing. People are tired of promises. People want action, okay?
the young people want to see that actually corruption is being fought, okay? And it's changing leadership. Okay, it's changing if individuals are incompetent and if individuals have continued on striking and doing deals that are making everybody else to be disadvantaged at the end of the day, taking them out. Young people want action. It's not business as usual.
Putting on your hat as an advisor, how would you advise the president of Kenya? What can he do going forward?
That's a very tough one. I know that there's been calls for him to step down, to resign. And it's pretty much coming from many different sectors of society, demonstrating that, you know, he can act. And I think acting, he got rid of individuals. It is sad that some individuals have had to lose their jobs. It seems in a situation like this that things like that are bound to happen. I think he needs to act a little bit more, and he needs to show the young people and everybody in the country, you know, that he is the leader that they really voted for. And he's able to deliver on the promises that he made, and he's also able to be the change that they thought he would be.
Sombo Muzata is the director of the MPA program and assistant professor in the Department of Political Science at James Madison University. Kenyan President William Ruto on Wednesday named 4 opposition politicians to join a broad-based cabinet in the wake of more than a week and month of anti-government protest. In total, Ruto announced the names of 10 ministers to be part of a reformed cabinet, including 4 who are close to veteran opposition leader Raila Odinga. Dozens of journalists joined marches on Wednesday in protest at what they see as heavy-handed government tactics to stifle media freedoms, including police attacks on journalists during recent demonstrations. The journalists, many wearing white, held placards reading "Journalists' Lives Matter, Shoot Not the Messenger," and "End the Brutality," as they staged rallies across several towns and cities.
Today we've demonstrated that as media we can come together and demand that we are respected and to demand that our issues are addressed. And today we've delivered 3 petitions. For the petition, we delivered the Inspector General of Police to demand that the journalists be guaranteed their safety whenever they are doing their job. And number 2, that the rogue police officers who have been attacking journalists, action must be taken to them.
I've said we are here to ensure that we protect the freedom of the media. That is why we are saying, do not crush the messenger, trust the messenger. Like now, for example, in Parliament, they are calling for fresh accreditations and they are banning some of the journalists from covering Parliament just because we covered the storming of Parliament by the protesters. For us, that is infringing in the rights and freedoms of the media. What we are basically telling the government and all other arms of government is that they must respect the freedom of the media, which is guaranteed under the Constitution. Article 34 of the Constitution guarantees media freedom.
We are banned. Who is going to let Kenyans know what is happening? In each and every day, the happenings in Parliament, it's freedom of us to tell Kenyans what is happening. However, we feel according to Section 34 of the Constitution, our freedom is being snatched from us each and every day. And we want to tell them we are not going to relent. We're going to be part of this movement until they agree to do what is right according to the Constitution.
Kenyan citizens expressing their views on the current situation. U.S. President Joe Biden addresses the nation Wednesday in his first speech since dropping out of the race for the White House. Meanwhile, Vice President Kamala Harris, newly endorsed by Biden, hits the campaign trail. VOA's Anita Powell reports from the White House.
It's awfully quiet around here. The White House was a hive of activity in recent weeks as President Joe Biden ramped up his re-election campaign.
I'm going to beat him again.
But with his recent withdrawal from the race this week, the scene has changed. Biden on Tuesday quietly returned to the White House after his recovery from COVID-19, as Vice President Kamala Harris's campaign took off. She hit Wisconsin on Tuesday. The opposing campaign of former President Donald Trump chose Tuesday to strike at both targets.
History will remember Joe Biden as not just a quitter, which he is, but one of the worst presidents in the United States of America. But my friends, Kamala Harris is 1,000,000 times worse, and everybody knows it. She signed up for every single one of Joe Biden's failures, and she lied about his mental capacity to serve as president.
In Washington, Secretary of State Antony Blinken extolled Harris for being, quote, a leading voice for American foreign policy and for our diplomacy. But he emphasized that Biden has a lot of work ahead of him, even as Harris campaigns to take the reins.
What he's intensely focused on is the work that remains over these next 6 months to continue the efforts, the work that we've been doing, particularly trying to bring peace to the Middle East, ending the war in Gaza, putting that region on a better trajectory.
Analysts agree.
1/8 of his presidency is still left, and there continue to be real challenges both at home in terms of lowering costs, in terms of protecting consumers from junk fees, in protecting workers from terrible rules that benefit corporations, and overseas, trying to bring a ceasefire and a peace in the Middle East, trying to continue to push back against Russia's war in Ukraine.
And this situation also leaves foreign leaders in an interesting position, as Israel's prime minister is learning this week as he prepares to meet with Biden, Harris, and Trump.
Well, I do think Biden has one problem internationally, which is that foreign leaders know he's not going to be around after a few more months. And so they're going to be hesitant to make deals with him because they know that whoever comes next, and even if it is Harris, she is likely to have her own foreign policy team and her own set of aims. On the other hand, I think foreign leaders will want to accomplish things they can get accomplished quickly with Biden because they're not sure what will happen next.
For the second time this month, Biden will use the somber setting that is the Oval Office to speak live to the nation. On Wednesday night, he'll use it to tell his people why he made the very personal decision to step back. Anita Powell, VOA News, the White House.
Voters in the U.S. are now facing a new presidential campaign with Vice President Kamala Harris likely to be the Democratic Party's nominee. VOA correspondent Scott Stearns looks at how some voters are reacting to the change.
In Joe Biden's hometown of Scranton, Pennsylvania, voter Eric Boylan says Democrats had little choice but to push Biden out.
I think he was a very good leader, but I do kind of also agree that his time has come and it's time to step aside and let somebody rise up within those ranks.
Voter Christine Stoll says if Biden is unfit to be a candidate, he should step down as president.
He should have dropped out a long time ago. He should leave the White House. He is not mentally stable enough to run this country.
Making Vice President Kamala Harris the nominee improves the party's chances against Republican candidate Donald Trump, says voter Daniel Brennan.
Harris polls well against Trump, so I think she has a real shot at winning. And I think he's doing the right thing right now, despite some people being so nervous and saying it's disastrous.
On a visit to Washington, Pennsylvania voter Bill Mills says Harris shares responsibility for Biden's economic failures.
We're noticing an increase in the price of groceries and fuel and the price of living, and our lives are worse now. And Vice President Harris is riding on those coattails. So it's going to be very hard to shake that opinion when we have all witnessed an economic downturn in all of our lives.
In Michigan, voter Jason Potts says the switch gives the Democratic Party a chance to connect with younger voters.
I always thought we're just Biden time until someone a little more tenacious comes along. And we'll see if that's Kamala. She's got more fire, definitely. And
as Vice President Harris worked on controlling illegal immigration, Florida voter Christopher Rangill says her failure at the border makes her unqualified to be president.
Kamala's garbage. She's worse than Joe. Or they on the same page. They about the same. But I don't think anybody's going to vote for Kamala. No one wants to back her. She had one job. That was handling the border.
In Washington, voter Alicia Jefferson hopes people do not see the vice president only as a woman of color, but look to her accomplishments.
And I hope they can look past anything else and look at that. But the world we live in, that some people will and some won't. And I hope it's not enough people that stand away or use that as an obstacle for her to get in office.
New Yorker Andrew Varshavsky says it will be tough for anyone to beat Trump.
Even if Biden were to stay in the race, or whoever we have right now as a Democrat, that
right now it's Trump's race to lose. So I'm a Democrat. I think it's going to be hard for us to win this race, no matter what happens now.
Harris appears to have enough commitments from party delegates to be the nominee, but it will take next month's Democratic National Convention in Chicago to make her the party's official candidate to challenge Trump. Scott Stearns, VOA News.
Vice President Kamala Harris has secured enough delegate pledges to unofficially become the Democratic Party nominee for president. VOA's Anthony Labruto traveled to Harris' alma mater, Howard University in Washington, D.C., to gather reaction to the recent developments.
I think it's a little corny that he dropped out last second, but I mean, as a leader, you gotta make tough decisions. So I'll just say him being a leader of the United States made a tough decision of dropping out of the race. Sad that it had to happen at this timing. It was a really weird timing, but you know, he did what he had to do. He said, you know what, I'm not fit to do this. You know, I'm not the person that the country needs or anything like that. So I'm gonna make the decision and drop out.
I'm thrilled. I'm behind her 100%. I'm gonna volunteer for her campaign as soon as she puts it out there. So I completely support her. I'm not a Howard University graduate. She's an AKA, I'm a Delta, and it's all love. So I'm behind her 100%.
Me personally, I think it was a bit of a surprise, knowing that the campaign has been going on for so long, and he's been going around doing these different things, and just to see him, not finish the race is a surprise. But however, I think it's a great deal that he is endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris. As a current Howard University student here, I think it speaks volumes to understand that somebody that looks like me and someone who's up on this campus can do such great things and be in that position of power.
Reaction from the campus of Howard University to Vice President Kamala Harris being endorsed for the top spot on the Democratic ticket. In about 90 minutes, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will deliver an address to a joint session of the U.S. Congress. Netanyahu arrives with plummeting popularity at home, and the current environment in Washington is quite unusual, to say the least. VOA's Philip Alexiou joins us live to talk about Netanyahu's visit and what to expect. Hello, Phil. What is Netanyahu trying to achieve on this trip?
Hey, Esther. Yeah, thanks very much. We're just outside the Capitol building. You can see behind me about a block away. But the Prime Minister has to shore up some support for himself. He has some plummeting ratings back home, and he's also trying to garner support and continued support for his fight against Hamas in Israel. Now, this is his first address to Congress since the October 7th attacks that took 1,200 lives and over 200 hostages. There's still about 100 hostages left, and that includes 8 Americans. So wondering, what is it that he's going to try to do? Well, the United States is in sort of a transition, as we've been talking about on the program, with Vice President Kamala Harris, who is now appearing to be the presumptive presidential nominee for the party. But Netanyahu has said that no matter who becomes president, Netanyahu has said that, quote, I will seek to anchor the bipartisan support that is so important for Israel. Mm-hmm. He also has gone on to say that I will tell my friends on both sides of the aisle that regardless of who the American people choose as their next president, Israel remains America's indispensable and strong ally in the Middle East. So, but anyway, so he's going to try to push for some of these things and maintain support, but it's a delicate balance.
And Phil, he comes to Washington, D.C. at a time of political transition here in the U.S. and questions about the Israel-Hamas war. How does that impact his visit?
Well, we've got a tremendous amount of protesting going on here even today. There's a tremendous amount of security. We've got choppers flying overhead. We've got a new president coming on board. It will either be likely former President Donald Trump again. It might be Kamala Harris. We don't know. We've also got some Republicans who are on Benjamin Netanyahu's side. They're in full support and unity for what he's doing, but the Democrats are skating here a little bit, trying to support him, and at the same time having to deal with so many sympathizers in Palestinian protests that we've been seeing here on the streets in Washington and in many campuses around the country.
Phil, thank you very much for your reporting. Philip Alexiou reporting live for us from the National Mall right here in Washington, D.C. Still to come in our technology report, we'll learn all about biofloc fish farming. Stay with us.
This week on Straight Talk Africa, U.S. President Joe Biden drops out of the presidential race and endorses Vice President Kamala Harris. Can she mobilize and inspire the electorate? Join me, Vincent McCory, for an in-depth discussion on presidential election on the next Straight Talk Africa.
Amid the climate crisis, women in some African countries often find themselves left behind by their husbands who migrate far away for work because of the drought affecting their region for years. Now alone, these abandoned women say they struggle to feed their children, and some never see their husbands again. On the next edition of Our Voices, we'll take a closer look at climate widows on the continent and how they are combating and surviving the environmental crisis and the impacts on their lives. Join the conversation each week right here on Our Voices.
In other news, dozens of people in Uganda who joined scattered anti-corruption rallies in Kampala Tuesday are behind bars on Wednesday after defying an official ban on demonstrations, according to their lawyers. Among those being held on nuisance charges are a prominent TV and radio presenter and 3 young protest leaders. And a new study is revealing that a twice-yearly shot is 100% effective in preventing new HIV infections in women in Africa. The shot is already being used in the United States and elsewhere as a treatment for the virus that causes AIDS, and drug maker Gilead is testing it for prevention. In a study of 5,000 young women and girls, there were no infections in those who received the shots. A Kenyan national started Tarps and Shades, a company that is changing the way tarpaulin products are used in Africa. VOA technology correspondent Paul Ndiho joins us now with more. Hello, Paul.
Thanks, Esther. Saleshi Chidasama is bringing new technology to aquaculture in Africa. Salehi has been inspiring and teaching Africans about sustainable freshwater aquaculture for the past 4 years. I spoke with him in Accra, Ghana.
What we do is we actually manufacture tarpaulin products. And one of the products we manufacture is the tarpaulin tanks. Now, I am also trained in this biofloc technology. So I am training people in the biofloc technology. I have tried to bring the technology such that people can learn how to do fish farming using this technology and using the tarpaulin tanks that we produce. The idea was to change lives across Africa, and we are also doing it across the globe. So what I realized is that some of the technologies that are currently being used are not sustainable. They are not very profitable. This is a very sustainable aquaculture technology that is profitable, environmentally friendly, and also quite profitable because what it does is it reduces your requirement of feed in the production cycle.
You talked about how you can produce maybe you can start with maybe a small production to large-scale production, meaning that you can produce like 7 tons of fish. Do you have the market to consume that fish?
Yes, 72 tons per acre, 72. The market for fish will never end because it's a good source of protein. More so with this kind of fish, which is organic. And then what happens is you normally have it in small tanks. You don't have it in a large pond. So you don't necessarily have to harvest all at once.
Okay.
You can do partial harvesting by tank. So you harvest one tank, maybe you get 2 or 3 tons. Then after a few days, you harvest a few more tanks, depending on your demand.
In terms of species, the different species out there, are you limited to what you can farm using your technology, or you can basically go out and do whatever you want to do on a variety of different species?
So this technology is good for any freshwater fish and also for shrimps, freshwater shrimp. I mean, you can do catfish, you can do tilapia, you can do any freshwater fish, but it's better for what we call filter feeders. Filter feeders are like shrimp and tilapia that consume feed as they are taking in water from the from the water body. So it helps them to utilize more of the microbial protein or the floc that is in the water as they are taking in the water for oxygenation purposes. And the way the system is designed, if done properly, it's supposed to be a disease-free system. So that also helps you to achieve better production levels.
How much personnel do you need on a site?
You don't really require a lot of personnel, just a few people to manage the system, to check parameters, and to do the feeding.
Does this require specialized skills, or any person can do it?
Anybody with a basic understanding of science, who then undergoes a training, can do this system.
Earlier you talked about scale. Do you see the possibility of scaling this to other countries where people, for example, in places where people have no access to the sea, to fresh water lakes? Do you see yourself maybe taking this technology to some of these countries?
Yes, there's a lot of interest from various countries, and we hope to take it to as many countries as possible in Africa, so that we can make Africa food secure and create the jobs that we hope to create.
Earlier you also talked about how there is less risk when it comes to diseases. What's the science behind that?
So the science behind that is, number one, the biosecurity. Normally these farms are in a controlled environment, so they are not open like the open ponds. So number one, you would control access to your ponds. So somebody coming from another farm with diseases and all would not easily be able to access your tanks and to be able to make contact with the water and the fish. When your water quality is not conducive, it results to certain diseases.
I look forward to learning more about this stuff. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Saleshi Chudusoma is the founder of the Ghana-based company Taps and Sheds. That's today's Tech Report. Back to you, Esther.
Paul, thanks. Be sure to join Paul Diho each Wednesday for another tech segment right here on Africa 54. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.